No Cap Fund presents The Representation Station. All right, we're live again. It is The Representation Station. I am your host, Jeff Mayhew, and I'm here with the crew, Walter, Clapp, and Roger. Walter, why don't you introduce yourself tonight? Tell the people a little bit about who you are.
Sure. So I've been asked to not talk about who I am wearing my work hat, but who I am wearing my, I don't know, my mother's umbilical cord, I guess. Um, so my name is Walter Clapp. I was born in El Campo, Texas, which is a tiny town on the Gulf Coast of Texas in between Houston and Corpus. My parents divorced when I was in first grade. My mother moved us to France, rural France, where I learned to count to 2,000 in French before I did in English. I also got to go to my first nudist beach and realized that maybe all of the Texas claims that we were absolutely 100% the greatest country on earth were not 100% true. I now live in Laramie, Wyoming, through a circuitous path. I went to law school in D.C. I spent time on the Hill there. I came to this because I actually am obsessed with our nation's electric grid. And it just so happens that the only way you can fix our nation's electric grid is with a functioning Congress, which we don't have. I have a couple patents related to this whole electric grid issue that I work on kind of over in that area over there. And I am married to a beautiful lady named Camila. She and I have 2 dogs and 2 horses and a cat named Hawk, which is irony walking.
That was great. I learned something new about you today, and that's exactly
Okay.
what I was looking for. So thank you, Walter. Roger, introduce yourself to the people tonight, please.
Hello, my name's Roger Scott. I live in North Carolina. I was actually born in North Carolina, but I've lived several other places and ended up going back. I earned my living as a CPA, although I did not study accounting in college. I studied economics. Just turns out I'm good at accounting, so path of least resistance. I too am married to a beautiful woman. We're going on 36, lots of years, 38 years, something like that. I lose track. 2 adult children, both practically perfect in every way. One in Portugal, one in Denver. And I'm an angry citizen. That's how I end.
Yes, you are our angry citizen. So tonight on the show, we have a very special guest. We welcome Sara Wolk to the station. Sara is the executive director and co-founder of Equal Vote Coalition, a nonprofit fighting for true equality in the vote itself. She is a speaker, writer, researcher, content creator, and organizer focused on teaching people about voting methods and the way they shape our society. Sara, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the station.
I am absolutely thrilled to be here talking about all of these things, and especially in this moment. So thanks for having me.
Excellent. Why don't you let the people know a little bit more about yourself? Where do you come from? How did you get in this role as executive director of Star Voting?
Sure. So I was born in Portland, Oregon, out on the West Coast, and had the privilege of growing up mostly in the mountains on a river. I got to spend a lot of time outside and a lot of time reading, and became deeply enamored with the forest, with nature, the natural world. So as I was kind of branching out and figuring out what I wanted to do, naturally, I got excited about the environment, environmentalism, and sustainability, which when I tried to translate that into a career path, it got me into sustainable agriculture. So that was the field that I thought I would find myself in professionally. But as time went on and I became more and more familiar with like the many barriers to why we can't have good things in this world, I started thinking about systemic change. So how can we be more effective on these issues? There are so many places where I found us just totally stagnated, polarized. The conversation was devolved to the lowest common denominator, and we weren't making progress, or as people, as individuals, we weren't able to be effective. So that is kind of what led me to voting reform. I was like, maybe if people could be empowered to better vote their conscience, could better be empowered to, have power politically, not just politicians or money in politics or these other factors, we could affect some real change. So, long story short, I learned about ranked choice voting first and got really excited about the pitch. Was like, yeah, we need to eliminate vote splitting and the spoiler effect. We shouldn't have to worry about wasting our vote on somebody who might not be viable. We shouldn't have to worry about electability or how much name recognition or popularity somebody has. We should be able to vote our conscience. And that actually led me to have a lot of those claims for ranked choice voting. I ended up getting fact checked at my first big public meeting that I went to. And I was like, okay, well, I've read a bunch of stuff. So A, I'm pretty sure you all are wrong and I'm right. And B, the truth comes out stronger when questioned. So let's have the debate. Let's have the conversation. And I volunteered for the research committee. We hosted an open forum for everyone in the Portland and larger Oregon area about what voting methods do we want? What do we want in a voting method? And we ended up coming to a pretty consensus supermajority decision to move forward with something called star voting, which was brand new at the time. And so that was very much like a moment where I would have loved for somebody else to have already done all of this. I would have loved to be like, great, thanks for doing the legwork. Like, I vote for that. But I found myself in a position where the work hadn't been done. The foundation wasn't laid. The science was brand new. Nobody knew about it. And so I kind of made a switch and decided, let me help this kind of new organization get off the ground. Let's put in the legwork and let's try and get this done right.
That's awesome. It's interesting that both you and Walter came to reforms because of other issues, right? And it's one of the things that I've told people for years, I got into politics specifically for reform. I just saw everybody arguing and was like, there's got to be a different way to fix this problem than just arguing, right? And you guys both kind of figured that out on your own as well. It's like, look, there's a system problem. We need to work on the system. So I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Jeff Mayhew. I'm a dad of 5. I got into politics to reform the system. I want to uncap the House, and that's why I'm here. Sarah, I appreciate you joining the show today. I guess to start out,
Wait, Jeff, you got to tell us what books you're reading these days.
That's right. I've got to tell you what books I'm reading. So, okay. So I'm in the middle of Regime Change by Patrick Deneen. He's the post-liberal guy. I haven't actually read his first book. It's sitting on my desk too. I'm going to actually read them backwards. I have a tendency to go backwards in time. So I'm doing that. And then I just finished that book right there. Biography of Martin Van Buren. He was our 8th president. It was a really great book, by the way. Martin Van Buren really was like the first reformer. That's what he was known for in New York politics. He reformed the system. He created, quote, a professional class of, politician. And while we might scoff at that now, there was reasons that he wanted that to happen. And it did actually make the system a little bit better. We mentioned it a little bit on our show last week, talking with Casey Maddox about how bloated the law system was in New York. And Martin Van Buren was one of the guys that helped reform that system and politics in general. It's a great story. If you love biographies and you love America and politics, you'll definitely love that book. So I highly recommend picking it up. All right. Sorry. Back to Sarah. Can you explain
and hold on. I gotta give a plug. So if you're interested in what Jeff is reading or other goodies in the video format, go to our website. We have a bunch of resources at www.y435.org and read books that we recommend, articles. Most of them touch on uncapping the House, some a little bit more nebulously, but please do check that out. All right, Jeff.
Thank you, Walter. I appreciate it. So can you explain to our voters, Sarah? You mentioned ranked choice voting and you mentioned star voting already, right? And you start it with ranked choice voting. A lot of people know that method, but not a lot of people potentially have heard about star voting. Would you mind just giving us a brief explanation of what star voting is?
So, star voting is just a better way to vote. Long story short, it is a more expressive ballot on the face of things. So it gives people more resolution, more voice, and more ability to really show how they really feel about the different candidates. So you give your favorite candidate 5 stars, just like a 5-star rating. You give your last choice 0 stars, and then you score the candidates as desired. So you can give people equal scores if you like them equally. You can show your preference order, and most importantly, you can show, is your second choice as good as your favorite? Great, give them 5 stars as well. Or are they almost as good as your favorite? Give them 4 stars. Are they a lesser evil who you really don't support, but there's somebody even worse out there? In that case, you can give them 1 star. So it's really up to the voter to decide how they want to score the candidates. If you don't like somebody, just leave them blank. That's entirely fine. No support. And it's counted in 2 steps. So star actually stands for score, then automatic runoff. And that's exactly how it works. The 2 highest scoring candidates are finalists, and your 1 person, 1 vote automatically goes to the finalist you prefer. And the candidate with the most votes wins.
Yeah, and if you're watching this, live, or you're watching it on on YouTube on a broadcast, if you look at my screen here, I pulled up one of their ballots so you can get an idea of what she was talking about. So similarly, like, and feel free to correct me, Sarah, if I'm wrong, but with ranked choice voting, you would basically have a ballot that's somewhat similar to the one that we're looking at, but you would be required to rank them in some sort of order. Everybody would fill a certain slot. The difference here in star voting, from my understanding, is you can rank them the same. You could have 3 people that you give 0, correct?
Correct. Yeah, you
And then
can absolutely just rank a couple of people who you've learned about and you're excited about and leave everyone else blank and
right,
move on.
and
Yeah,
could you do 2 people at 3?
sure.
Yeah.
If you like
So
them equally, you should score them equally. If you
right.
have preference, you should show your preference.
Right. So I think the big I think difference here is adaptability or flexibility in your voting method. Am I correct here?
Exactly. And also user friendliness. So, as we talk about changing our voting method, I think our number one first thing on the list is to ensure, are people going to be able to do this? Are we creating barriers for voting? Are we making the process easier or harder? And I know for me personally, I try and be a pretty educated voter. I try and read up on the different candidates. And sometimes you'll have a couple that have a similar platform, that have similar experience. They're maybe in the same coalition or from the same larger faction. And it can be really tricky to decide, I like them both. Which one do I want to vote for? And that's where you get into, okay, well, what's everybody else going to do? And voting shouldn't be herd mentality. It really should be, um, there's no reason that I can't say, what do you want for dinner? Um, do you like Thai food? Do you like burritos? Do you like pizza? Yes, I like all of the above. I would be super represented and have a happy belly no matter what we decided there, but I am a pescatarian. So if we're having steak, I wouldn't be able to eat it all. So that's kind of the minimum resolution we need for voting as well. And
Oh,
then that just quickly to touch on that thing about equal support. Um, in life, if I have a bigger coalition, if I were to somehow convince you all and all of your friends to work together on these things, that would be a good thing. But in voting, the more candidates I have on my side or in my coalition, the more likely we are to split the vote as our supporters vote, some for each of us, and we end up divided and conquered. So that's a fundamentally broken thing that's in the math itself. And every country who does our current traditional voting method, where you're voting for one candidate only, over time that devolves into hyper-polarized two-party domination. So it is a race to the bottom, and it's a problem with the math. Um, a lot of people think that humanity is to blame and that we're just kind of divided and divisive by nature, and that may hold true, but this is a polarization problem that is in the system design itself, and solving it would absolutely have a huge, kind of unfathomable impact.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there a little bit is kind of what Madison says is ambition must be made to counteract ambition. And it's like, yes, we do have these problems. Maybe it is intertwined with who we are. However, there are other things we can do to maybe limit those problems to make it less of a problem. And obviously, that's what we want to do here. We want reform. And so that leads me to my next question for you is, with star voting, where do you see it being most effective and being able to get passed first for primary elections or for general elections? Because there's a lot of groups out there. You can see the book over my shoulder, the primary solution. They want an open primary system, right? And if you were going to do an open primary system, I think it would be prime for a new voting method like ranked choice voting or star voting. Um, but, I can see the possibility for general elections too. Like, where do you see the path and what's the goal?
So, um, we're a volunteer-led organization, and we have incredible volunteers and people working on this all over the country and all over the world, really. And a number of them are physicists. And I think that what we're looking for in voting reform is really the unified field theory. We don't want one voting method for primaries and something totally different for general elections, and this system for this scale and that system for that scale. We want something that's adaptable, that's going to be accurate and effective for any level of government, and that has a path to scale and to viability in all 50 states and then some. So star voting is naturally compatible with electoral laws all around the country. It meets the best practices and um, kind of gold standard for election integrity. So it's easy to secure, it's easy to audit, it doesn't have some of the issues of other methods. It works great for primaries, it works great for general elections, it works great in an open primary context. It's especially accurate more than other methods if there are multiple viable candidates in the race, but it also works fine if there's only two or a couple of candidates. And so that's really, you know, as we look at how are we going to get this done, obviously we're starting local, we're thinking small, we're trying to build our case studies and build our pilot projects and our resume. But the reason that we're recommending star voting in particular is because it does scale so well to any context.
So, you kind of touched on it there already, but we are kind of hyper polarized. And so my question would be is how is a different voting method? How is voting going to help us, heal our broken political process?
Yeah. So if you think of the American electorate as kind of a bell curve, where we've got kind of people on the far, far left and we've got people on the far, far right. And I'm not sure if I'm mirror imaged in this camera or if left and right are as they appear to be to me. But generally in society, we've kind of got this bell curve where most people are somewhere in the middle, um, whether that they identify as moderate or just kind of common sense, practical people who, want good things for people. And yet we find ourselves in this hyperpolarized two-party landscape where there's kind of this hole in the middle. And candidates who are in the middle don't have a place where they can run and compete on a level playing field. And that really is because of a single thing in our current system where, let's say, I'm a candidate ideologically in the middle, running on a platform of puppy dogs and kittens or something and free pizza. I would have to compete with people on the left, and I'd have to compete with people in the right for my vote. Whereas if I'm somebody who's all the way on the left, I don't have to compete with the left. I only have to defend from the right. And on the right, I wouldn't have to defend from the right. I'd only have to defend from the left. So vote splitting is, many people know of it as like the Nader effect. So it's cost both major parties the presidency. In 2000, we had Al Gore and Ralph Nader, the Green Party guy. They split the vote and elected George Bush Sr. Without a true majority. And when you looked at the political calculus and the math there, it was pretty likely that there was kind of a left majority, in fact. And then previously, the opposite had happened with Ross Perot splitting the vote in 1994. And if you looked at it, probably Bill Clinton wouldn't have won if Perot hadn't run. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve. And, you know, in the wake of elections like that, voters are like, oh, wow, I voted third party because I liked this third party or this independent. But that backfired and helped elect my worst case scenario. So next time, I'm just going to vote for that front runner on my side. And over time, as we strategically vote in these factions, it creates two-party domination. And then once we're in those two factions, the incentive for the candidates and the voters is really to demonize the other side, to cater to our base. If somebody's in the minority, I can absolutely demonize them all the way, and there's really no political repercussion. That'll just mobilize my base and help me win. So we have a lot of really perverse incentives in our current system that leave us divided and conquered. And
Yeah,
it's not our fault.
I like that analogy. I'm just thinking of like, I don't know, like a game of King of the Hill, like when you were a kid and then like you've got to fight off both sides. Like it becomes more difficult than if you can back yourself up against the wall, right? Or somebody you have protection on the one side of the hill, maybe with your brother or your sister, they're protecting one side for you, so you only have to fight one side, right? It makes it easier. So yeah, that was a great analogy. I like that. And you're right, incentives. We have some incentives that need to be changed. And election reform, obviously, voting methods is something that I think a lot of people can get behind. Um, so, as you guys grow and you try to, get your voting method out there, what type of other reforms or organizations or types of things do you see yourself compatible with to grow your specific reform and get it pass through legislatures, get it talked about in the political sphere?
Yeah. So we are explicitly a nonpartisan organization, and we think that that's really, really important, especially for electoral reformers. I'm actually shocked that that even has to be said, but there are a lot of really partisan electoral reform groups out there, and we don't love that. But we do try and be kind of a big tent, be inclusive of people all across the spectrum. So we're nonpartisan, but our movement is panpartisan. And I think that that's really important. Good voting reform is a win-win, or more accurately, a win-win-win-win-win-win-win, where people on the major party side of things would find that the major parties, they wouldn't go away. They would just become more representative. They wouldn't have to worry about people being two-faced and candidates who don't really believe in the party platform running under that banner because that's what they have to do to win. They wouldn't have to worry about, um, gatekeeping their candidates to kind of keep their mind share narrow and focused. So there's a lot to benefit major party candidates and the parties themselves. And there's just as much to benefit, obviously, all of the minor parties where, the reason we don't have viable or nationally viable or more viable third parties, it's not for lack of trying. We have amazing political activists and have for the entire lifespan of this country who step up and start third parties and have a beautiful vision and explain it well and do the work. So the reason we don't have viable third parties is just, again, completely baked into the system. So
Yeah,
leveling the playing field, making sure everyone has a fair shake and that the candidates and parties who deserve to win will win fair and square. Um, yeah, rising
so
tide rises all boats.
So I think back to what you were talking about in the last answer with Ross Perot, and he got a pretty substantial amount of the popular vote. I think more than any third party candidate, and he had done a lot of work to actually build a party, not just a single candidacy. Now it kind of went away afterwards. However, I wonder if more people were if there was a different type of voting method. I think more people might have been willing to cast that vote for him in that election than actually did. Because you got to think a whole bunch of people went and go, I really do want Perot, but I don't think he's going to win and it's going to waste my vote. But I think he got, and I don't know if one of you guys can look it up for me. Did he get like 19% of the vote? It was like a crazy high number for a third party candidate. I can't remember now.
I think it was more than that. I also don't remember the exact number, but yeah, huge. And that's one of the most important selling points, I think, of something like star voting, because the 5-star rating and ratings in general, they're really just the gold standard of polling. It's a system that's been used by millions and billions of people all around the world to measure nuanced public opinion. And at the end of the day, we want to find the most representative winner, the winner who best represents the will of the people and will make as many people as possible as satisfied as possible with the outcome. But we also want that other data. So I want to know if I lost, did my message resonate? Was I also popular, but there was just somebody who maybe did a little bit of a better job? And knowing the full public opinion in a clear and accurate way would have so much value for our political discourse going forward. I don't think it can be understated.
And I did just confirm he got 18.9% of the vote. No
18.
electoral votes, so he didn't carry any one state, but he did get, nearly 19% of the vote.
Yeah. And if you can't vote your conscience, is it really a democracy? We have no way to know how people would vote if they didn't have to vote strategically.
Mm. All right. So, um, last question here before we move into our around the horn style here. What barriers have you found with your election reform and star voting, and how do you what's your plan to overcome them? Because we know here like, we've already talked about it. The word barriers comes up repeatedly, right? What barriers are you guys facing, and what are you doing to overcome them?
Yeah. So interestingly, when we go out on the street, all over the country, we have people who go out in the field and talk to regular people, and the reception's generally really good, especially if we're able to compare the current system with star voting. Where we run into a challenge is when people are like, "Oh, is this ranked choice voting? I've heard of that," and it used to be that we got, "Oh, is this ranked choice voting? I really like ranked choice voting." And we'd have to say, actually, ranked choice voting has this handful of issues that star voting was invented to address. So it kind of is the goals behind ranked choice voting, but a modern, upgraded version. But today, and especially over the last few years, we're getting a ton of, "Ooh, is this ranked choice voting?" Same question, different inflection. And what we saw is that the electoral science community going back decades has really been blowing the whistle about ranked choice voting. It's very easy to accidentally mess up your ballot. The most common voter error is people rank candidates equally because they like them equally, and that can void your ballot. It requires full centralization of the ballots, which is slow, um, undermines election security, and is super expensive. And no good voting method should require centralization of the ballots. Chain of custody is really important. Local tabulation is really important. And obviously, just logistical viability is really helpful. So star voting, it's just addition in 2 steps. So just like right now, our current system, you vote in the primary, they add up the votes. You vote in the general election, they add up the votes. With star voting, you add up the votes in the scoring round, and then you add up the stars in the scoring round, find the 2 highest scoring candidates, and then one person, one vote, you add up the votes in that automatic runoff. So it's just addition. And then I think the third and possibly biggest deal breaker with ranked choice voting is that it's been systematically oversold. There's been a really long, millions, if not tens of millions, hundreds of millions. I'm not sure what the running total is, but a ton of money has been spent nationally lobbying for this reform and essentially just telling people what they want to hear. So they guarantee majority outcomes. They guarantee that if your first choice is eliminated, your next choice will be counted, that you won't have to worry about wasted votes, that you don't have to worry about strategic voting. And all of those are false. And they're false in the elections that matter the most, where there's multiple viable frontrunners. So if we had agreement on the facts, I think it would be very easy to make the case of, we want X, Y, and Z, and star voting delivers on X, Y, and Z the best. There's always going to be pros and cons. There's a calculation to be made about nuance and how expressive it is versus how simple it is or whatever that we can debate. But misinformation around ranked choice voting has set our movement back decades. And in recent years, we've had Alaska and New York City and Oakland, California all had catastrophic failures with ranked choice voting in exactly the way that election science predicted that it would fail. So we've
So
now
your biggest barrier is another election reform.
it is. Yeah, and now 17 states have banned ranked choice voting. Some of those bans have also banned, more broadly, other electoral reforms. Luckily, star voting hasn't been banned anywhere yet, but approval voting, which is another good option and that had been adopted in the Midwest, in Missouri and in North Dakota, was banned in both those states, even though it doesn't have the issues that people were angry about.
Interesting. Um, I'll have to do some research on that. I some of that stuff I've heard before, some of it is new to me. But I'd be curious to kind of dig into the numbers and dig into the data. Maybe we'll have you back later to talk about it a little bit deeper. Um, but do you have a question real quick before we move to the next segment, Walter? Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I kind of have a twofold question, which is there a place, Sarah, where star voting folks and ranked choice voting folks have like debated this or like pointed to the facts and like kind of like dove into this where we might be able to go and see, how that particular debate played out?
Yeah, and I absolutely recommend doing that. I think debate is a fabulous way to hash this out. It's so valuable, and it's something that, there are a lot of really detailed questions. Obviously, what I just said threw out like a bunch of stuff that people would want to dig into. So
Yeah.
our YouTube channel is Equal Vote Coalition. And we have a whole kind of playlist that are all like panel discussions and presentations, I think, is another one. And both of those, especially the panel discussions, we've got some really spicy, good debates.
Okay.
Also, I have to do a quick shout out to the Forward Party. They hosted and put together a really amazing X or Twitter debate that was, I think, one of the best ever at the time that it was recorded. So
Okay. And
yeah,
that was between star voting and ranked RCV?
yeah. And
Okay,
we've had
cool.
a number of debates that's like star and versus ranked choice. We've had some that were star voting versus ranked choice versus approval voting. And then we had another one recently that was hosted by oh, I'm blanking on the name. Um, Braver Angels, which is a nonpartisan debate
Mm.
organization that does great work. And we actually had a representative for the status quo at that one, Phil Izon, who has been leading the ranked choice voting repeal effort in Alaska. So that I think was really interesting to have, the three main reform factions and then the anti-reform faction. And we actually had full agreement from him as well as the other two reformers that they'd be happy with star voting. Star voting addresses their concerns, but um, but he was obviously leading a national repeal effort for ranked choice voting.
Okay, so then can you is there any steelman argument for keeping ranked choice voting, or do you just think like, hey, ranked choice voting folks, like we just need to merge and you need to accept the superior math that we bring to the table?
Yeah. So for years, and actually for years after I had kind of switched and changed my mind and was supporting star voting or some of these other more modern proposals, I still was in the camp of like, well, RCV is better than what we've got now. It's at least a step in the right direction. But, um, in Alaska, the first election that they ever had, 60% of the voters preferred a Republican first choice. The moderate Republican was preferred over all other candidates, and ranked choice elected the Democrat. So backlash against that in
Yeah.
particular, that was just a jarring, like they had said it eliminates the spoiler effect, but these two Republicans split the vote.
Hmm.
Um, and Sarah Palin actually was the spoiler, interestingly, in that one. So backlash against that has been catastrophic for the entire voting reform movement. It
Yeah.
set us back decades, and it was completely preventable. It was literally like, this is exactly what we said would happen, and here we are. And we don't have this time to waste.
Hmm.
Polarization is gross. It breaks up families. It breaks up friendships, and it in its extreme is war, civil war. I don't think
Hmm.
that we have the luxury to do this wrong and to ignore the science on such a clear-cut issue. And the fact that our current system is highly, highly polarizing is undisputed. Every single election science person ever has agreed on that. Ranked choice does help with polarization a little bit, but again, it introduces election security issues, wasted vote issues, and user error issues that are just, they're not things we need to compromise on. They're totally solvable things.
All right. So
All right.
let's get to the next segment here, Walter. Um, and you guys kind of touched on it. This word has come up a lot, and is debate. And as everybody knows, last week in the news, we had a really awful example of a rise of political violence. Charlie Kirk was assassinated live debating, um, and with that hyperpolarization, all the pointing, how do you guys, all of us here as reformers, how do we pull people together and start to solve this problem? I'm going to start with Roger, if you don't mind, and then we'll go to Walter, and then Sarah, I'm going to come to you last since you had the whole first segment. Oh, Roger, your mic's not working.
Maybe you're muted.
It's not working.
No,
All right.
I can't hear you either.
It,
I'll jump in while he tries to figure that out. You know, God, and I think it's important for us to also recognize, the Speaker of the Minnesota House. She and her husband were assassinated this year as well. There was a school shooting in Colorado at the same time that Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and there's this pattern for me of young males who are getting radicalized very quickly and doing stupid things. And I think it is of paramount importance that we, as reformers, say, look, there are problems. We have problems in our country. Here they are. Well, I'll list them for you, right? Like here are the 8 problems that I find most glaring. But the solutions are somewhat clear, right? The solutions are look to how you vote for people, right? How the rules are written by those people once they get elected, and try to define, what it is you're looking for in a representative. And to this end, I'm increasingly convinced that, we have this part of the polarization is, it's obviously left and right. It's like, hyper-capitalism, individualism, and, I'll say communism on the other side. And they're arguing that the fundamental unit of account is different, right? On the far right, we're saying it's the individual. It's the individual. It's the individual. And on the far left, we're saying, no, it's the community. It's the community. It's the community. And what I want to say is the fundamental unit of account is representation, right? That how you get your voice heard in either of those systems, right, ultimately comes down to who you are electing to represent your views and to enact them, and to educate you about what's going on. And, I'm sickened by what has happened and the cries and the cheers about the violence, because fundamentally we believe that our Constitution, right, Article 5 provides us a peaceful way to rewrite this document. We just need a new Congress to help us do it. That's our view. And so there is hope. But it requires, folks understanding that there are clear solutions and, taking action on them and building coalitions. And so I'll pass it over to Roger. It sounded like he got his mic working.
I don't understand why it wasn't working. My microphone showed it was not muted. The phone was somehow in the mix, so I shut that down. Maybe that had something to do with it. Okay, so the question is, with hyperpolarization, how are reforms going to pull people together and solve problems? Well, my answer is going to be disappointing. We're doing this work here. We're doing it now, and we're going to continue doing it. So we're going to be there and waiting when people are ready, right? But we are not at that point yet as Americans. I believe much more blood will have to be spilled before Americans will get an understanding that this is problematic. That's just me. I have a very pessimistic view on this. I think we're looking at a few years of heavy political violence. And when people finally come to the conclusion that this has got to stop, they'll turn to messages like ours. We got to keep doing the work. But I don't think we're going to be able to get to the goal line just on the strength of the work. I think people have to change their attitudes, and Americans are not very good at that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I I disagree with you on 2
Okay.
points. One is I do think that Americans can overcome that. I understand where you're coming from. You're looking at history, you're looking at the way things has changed in the past, and you're saying this is the pattern that we've lived through. This is the pattern that we're going to live through. I do believe we have agency. We talk about that all the time on the show. We have power. We have opportunity to create different futures for ourselves. And, overall, I think that we have to believe that if we want to limit the amount of political violence in our world, which is something that I think that I don't want to happen. I don't want my kids to have to live through it. I don't want to have to live through it. I don't want anybody that's, in power now to have to live through it despite our differences. And so, while I again, I do understand where you're coming from. I just think it's important, you know, at least my personal goal is to carve a different path for us. I do think that we can overcome this and we don't have to go that same path that we've gone before. Um, Sarah, I'll let you jump in here. How do we reformers depolarize, bring people together?
Yeah, I think the reason that Charlie Kirk's assassination hit me and hit so many people so hard is because to me, yes, there are all of these policy reforms that we should pass, and there's kind of a strategic path of, if we do star voting first, it kind of opens the door to depolarization, which then opens the door to things like constitutional conventions and um, Supreme Court stuff and things that are more of a long game. But on the ground, what that looks like is a lot of one-on-one conversations. It looks like people being willing to step up and have the hard conversations in public, say their ideas, um, openly and listen to opposing viewpoints. And that's exactly what Charlie was doing, as a career and as a, mission in life. And at the moment he was killed. So for me, I wasn't a naturally confident public speaker growing up. This isn't a comfortable space. And I think even for people who are comfortable um, talking, it's a really brave thing to put yourself out there and try and make the world a better place. And platforming people who you disagree with and having that open dialogue, it is how we're going to get there. So I'm afraid that something like this, political violence like this, is going to make people afraid to step up. But I know for me personally and for people like me, I think it is our duty to have the conversations. It's our duty to dig into hard questions in particular. They're the ones that have the most value. And hopefully, if we do it, especially if we do it in good faith, the truth comes out stronger when questioned.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm hearing we need stay stay the course, right? Continue the debate, remain hopeful, educate, as Walter likes to talk about a lot. Um, so I think you all make great points, and I again agree or disagree, but agree with
We have
all,
to
but
make sure
but
we're ready
want
when
to.
the time is right.
The time is now. The time is
I
now.
So we'll be ready
Well,
now, but we also have
well,
to be ready in 2 years and be ready in 5 years because I don't think the time is now, but we're ready and we'll
Yeah.
continue to be ready.
well. So actually, I'd like to stay here for just a minute, and because I think Sarah brought up a good point, right? That in some ways, what we're doing here on the internet is great, but it really does require us stepping foot on the public debate stage. And you know, something I've been toying around with Sarah is like, what if you and I agreed to go around and debate which reform should be passed first, right? Like, what is more important, uncapping the House or, you know, star voting to depolarize the nation? And you know, putting that, on college campuses, that to me feels more concrete, right? It would take some bravery, but it's not just us saying like we need to stay the course. It's like, well, here's an action that we could take as two organizations together to move the ball forward in a way that kind of acknowledges this terrible thing that we've all been grappling with, and but maybe does it in a way that's focuses on the solutions rather than the problems.
Yeah, I mean, my first reaction is I would love to be on the debate stage with you anytime, Walter. We met at a panel discussion in person, and I think that was amazing. It kind of feels like debating like what's more important, like preventing crime or education or healthcare. You know, our reforms aren't mutually exclusive. We could do both
Right.
at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we
both.
need more controversy.
But there
Dude,
is
you want to bring RCV in the vote in the debate?
That'll be watched more. Let's face it. If there's a strong disagreement over something, that's definitely going to get more attention than two people who kind of agree.
I know.
and to me, like for us, those of us who are in the room here, the No Cap Fund and the Equal Vote Coalition and Star Voting Project at large, you could do them both at the same time. You could both do them immediately, and that'd be totally fine. But in terms of how hard is it to get done, and is there an order of operations where would you guys be more able to do what you're trying to do if we already had star voting? I think star voting would make it a lot easier to win a constitutional convention of any kind, because you need, what is it, 3/4 of states, and then or 3/4 of
2/3 and then
states to
3/5.
agree.
But we don't need a constitutional convention
Or
to do what we
3/4.
need to do. We just need a simple bill passed through the House.
Gotcha.
Just to be clear, our listeners know that because we talk about it all the time. Ultimately, I think where we go as an organization once the House is uncapped is, I think there does need to be an amendment be written to make sure that this doesn't happen again. But at least for our first step, it's an apportionment bill. We've got the 2030 census coming up. There's the prime opportunity to do it. Like I was telling Roger a minute ago, this is our time. I don't want to wait another 10 years. I'm already gray enough. I don't know what's going to happen to me in 10 more years, but
Yeah, I felt it was our time at the 2020 election too. So because the census was coming up, and that came and went without change. So that's part of why I'm pessimistic.
well,
Yeah,
we didn't have an
I mean,
organization in 2020. Now we've got one. And we
I
still
got
got 3 years.
2016
5.
was the year where I really entered this political discourse, and I think public appetite in that moment for change was like at an all-time high. And then I saw in 2018 there was still just this massive political appetite for change. Star voting almost passed in 2018, its first try. And then the pandemic hit, and we felt this like huge wave of people being like, oh, I thought I wanted change. Now I just want things to actually like not change. I just want things to be like stable, and like, can we just chill out for a minute here? And now 2025, 5 years later, I feel like people are in limbo. Things are really bad. People are afraid of change. They want change. They know things need to change. They don't know how. They're afraid of doing it wrong. So I don't think that people are ready to take the vote today to solve these problems. I think people need a lot more information and a lot more security that we're making the right calls. But they're not going to be ready if we just wait a couple more years and try then. We have to do this now to be ready as soon as possible.
All right. So we kind of touched on it. Debating is a big part of this, being able to speak freely. Obviously, we talked about Charlie Kirk in the last question. Over the weekend, there was a big protest in England for free speech. We have people on both the right and the left in our country who constantly want to, claim free speech for their own when it's convenient for them, but then weaponize it when it's convenient for them in a different way. So my question is how can reform groups funnel that energy for open debate and free speech into useful action for reform? Walter, I'll start with you this time, and then we'll go to Sarah and then Roger.
So, the right to speak freely. Yeah. So, George Washington famously or infamously said that, the First Amendment, what we know as the First Amendment, exists, at least the free speech part, to allow us to elect quality representatives. Your freedom to speak doesn't really matter if your vote doesn't count and if your representatives are capped such that you don't actually have a voice, right? Your voice is too diluted just due to the numbers. So, freedom of speech is important to move the ball and to maybe create artificial controversy to gain attention to something. Although that I don't like it.
Well, I don't think we need artificial controversy. There's plenty of real controversy.
Right. Well,
true that.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking. Yes, I was thinking about you and me debating. Right. That like we would need something, some theater, some theatrical disagreement between us. I think to maybe keep the students engaged. But I don't know. I could be convinced otherwise.
Smiling on both sides, I think would go a long way.
Yeah, and I mean, right, that it reminds me of like wrestling, right? Like wrestling is like this, like also, there's this like Trump connection, but it's like it's fake. It's obviously fake, but people love it, which is like bewildering to me because as soon as I learned that it was fake, I was like, oh, it's not for me. But people are still just like wildly fascinated by these contrived disagreements. Sorry to go on a tangent here. Same thing with, in some ways, like in baseball or in football, but especially like in hockey, right? Like a lot of times the fights in hockey are just like, not always. Sometimes they're genuine, but often, they're just like to give the crowd what they came for. Anyway, free speech is the bedrock of our republic, but it's in service of representation and of being an informed voter. So I think it's important to keep that in mind.
So I have a question for you. Kind of if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's around to hear it, is it heard? And if you have free speech, but you have nobody to represent you, do you have free speech? You don't have to answer that. It's rhetorical.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. I'm not gonna dignify your rhetorical question with a response.
Sarah, well, I'll pass it to you. How do we energize the free speech people to reform?
So we all want a voice, but beyond that, we want a powerful voice and we want an equally powerful voice. And so that's why we are the Equal Vote Coalition. Mathematically, with the current system, if you have more candidates on your side, your vote is mathematically less powerful. So that's what vote splitting is referring to. It's literally splitting the power of your vote and meaning that you need more people on your side to win than you should. So with star voting, one of the things that I think is maybe less immediately apparent and just really, really inspiring once it clicks is the fact that it elects majority preferred winners whenever possible. So in that runoff, you have just the two finalists. The finalist preferred on more ballots wins. But it also gives the minority a huge vote and real meaningful leverage. So if I'm somebody whose favorites never win, I'm always voting for the underdog. In the current system, I have no power. The other side knows that they don't need my vote to win, and away they go. But with something like star voting, there's a huge incentive for them to get me from 0 stars, I don't like you, to 1 or 2 or 3 stars. The benefit of getting me to go from 0 stars to 2 stars is the same as getting me to go from 3 stars to 5 stars favorite. So that gives the minority essentially kind of veto over the worst candidates from the other side. They can say, I'm in a red district, I'm on the left, somebody from the right is going to win, but I have a choice between somebody who actively wants me harmed and somebody who's like a family values person with a great resume and who I would be happy to have over for dinner. With star voting, you're able to show that. And it gives huge incentives to candidates to reach out across party lines, to reach out across faction lines, and huge incentives for voters to actually research candidates who they don't support. So if I've got, my candidates on the ballot, these are the ones who are on my side. Right now, I can easily ignore everybody else. I don't have to hear them out. But if I need to decide, am I going to give this one 0 and this one 1 star or the other way around? I'm going to have to read your platform. And I might find out that it's not as, that you're not this demonic, horrible person that I was told you were when I actually listened to you for yourself. So for free speech people, if they want to be heard, they need voting methods that incentivize us to hear each other out.
There we go. All right, Roger, your turn. How do we energize the free speech people into reform?
We can't hear you again, my brother.
No, this time it's my fault. This time I failed to click the button.
All right.
Well, the answer is not that different from the answer I gave on the previous one. We do the work. We educate the public, and we make sure that there's a glide path for them when they make that change. If we can change their minds with language, and I personally have changed some minds just with language, we give them a place to go. But again, I don't think the majority of the American public is there yet. They have to suffer through much more strife before they're going to stop and say, I don't like what's going on here. I think I might be ready for some change. I don't think we have enough of that yet. We just got to be ready when enough of that is available. I'm not a salesman. I depend on logic and data to win arguments. And apparently, salesmen are much more effective at getting people to do what they want. So I'm kind of at a loss here.
Yeah, I can see that. I think ultimately, on my side, I do a podcast called What the Book with my good friend Craig Stewart, and in the last, we just recorded this last week, and the book we read this month was Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, and it was just dreadful to read because I did not enjoy the book at all. I didn't enjoy the topic matter. I didn't enjoy the rambling characters, but the message, what you learn from the book, is important. And ultimately, I forgot my point of how this connected to what Roger was saying. I got so distracted talking about the book. I'm sorry. What were you saying, Roger?
Yeah, I was saying, I don't think we're there yet. We can try and change people's minds with language, but in a lot of cases, especially Americans, we're very stubborn. Something or someone has to reach up and smack them in the back of the head. You remember NCIS, DiNozzo, Gibbs was always smacking him in the back of the head. We call it a verb in our house. It's called the DiNozzo. A lot of Americans have to get a DiNozzo somehow before they'll say, wait a second, things aren't going the way they're supposed to. Maybe we need to think about something different here. I don't hear enough of that right now. All we can do is work towards that day.
So I remember what I was going to say now. Thank you. So it was when I in the show, I talked about with my friend Craig about the fact that, and it's kind of like what we're talking about here, the hyper-polarization. You've got the far right, you've got the far left, and I think you've got the emotional and the reasonable, right? And if you go too far in emotion, and you get a nut job that, just kills out of passion, right? If you go too far to the reasonable side, you get a guy who's trying to create an ideology, which is ultimately what the murderer in Crime and Punishment is trying to do. He's got this idea, he's written a paper about it, and you see him throughout the book basically trying to rationalize with himself and others, justify what he's done, hide from what he's done. And at the end, well, I'm not going to give it away, but
Go ahead.
don't read I know it's a terrible book. Don't read it. I mean, he gives himself up. It is a long book. He gives himself up, right? Like he gives up at some point in time. Because I think at the end he kind of realized that he was wrong, or he's so far deep into it, he's trying to look for an escape valve. But again, I think it's to the point is like we have to find somewhere in the middle. We've got to use our emotion to drive our logic, right? And we've got to use our good emotion to drive our good data, right? Like Sarah's talking about is like, look, if we've got this data that says something's going to do this and we've seen it do this, maybe we shift and pivot to a different thing, right? And if we're going to be loud and we're going to try to corral people together in an audience, we should try to have a hopeful, optimistic tone, because I think overall that's going to be better for everybody. So sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And we're running a little bit long. Sarah, do you need a jump? You're good to go? Okay.
Yeah.
And this is just, I've been, I also got sick right before Charlie got killed and the school children got killed. And so I've spent too much time on the internet and not doing work. And so I've been thinking about all this too much. And one of the things that, comes up over and over again was Charlie's faith, right? And like right before he died, that somebody asked, like, if you're going to die, what would you want to be remembered for? And he was like, the courage of my faith. And he also often recited text from the Bible, John chapter 8. So this is in the New Testament, in the fourth book, the fourth gospel. There's this story of the scribes and the Pharisees have this woman, this adulterer, who they're getting ready to stone to death. And Jesus says to them, May whoever is amongst you without sin cast the first stone. And he kind of just defeats them and they all walk away. But then Charlie always points out, but then he goes up to the woman and says, now sin no more. And he used that to make the point that, the gospel says, love, right? First and foremost, it's about, love and forgiveness, but also truth, right? That, also don't sin, right? Like figure out what sin might be and try not to do that. And for me, there's this resounding irony in the New Testament, which is kind of twofold. And I apologize for the tangent, but I just have to get this off my chest. The first is that Jesus repeatedly says and criticizes the scribes. So the people that write things down, he repeatedly is like, those are the bad guys. Those are the bad guys. And it appears there in John chapter 8. It's the scribes that are going to stone this woman to death. Jesus never wrote a single word down. And he also never instructed his followers to write anything down. And yet they took it upon themselves to write things down. And then obviously, we know we've just had, 2,000 years of religious battle and war and conflict and violence that has, come about from this. And for me, the point, one of the points of debate is that it's live, it's in person, right? The First Amendment in some ways is, I think, best experienced like this. This is kind of the bare minimum, right? We can see each other, we can feel the emotion, we can see, our body language to a certain extent. And it's not written down, right? Because so often when we write things down, they get corrupted. They get used for ulterior purposes, right? And at the same time, we live with this tension that is we have to write things down. Like, I'm a lawyer, for Lord's sake, right? Like, that's all I do is write things down so we can gotcha, somebody later. And so we need laws, right? We need all of these things, but I think we have to recognize kind of like that it's this humorous project that is always going to be imperfect, but to do it better, right? Less poorly, there are clearly some ways that we can make that happen. Like, for instance, getting real debate back on the House floor, right? Like getting real debate back on the House floor. Not all these just backroom deals and, just Hollywood pitches. And so, for me, how do we, going back to this question, like how do we make this work? We build coalitions and we debate and we get out there and we make a Broadway musical or some music. And we have to get in the culture. And I didn't mention this, like I've had profound transformative experiences with the higher power, with God, Yahweh, Yeshua, which is Jesus's real name for those of you who didn't know. But I'm not religious, because I think religion is it's the corruption of whatever is going on up there.
The long stream of telephone.
Yeah, exactly. It's but I think that we would be remiss as an organization not to consider the searching feeling that everyone has around spirituality and our relationship with the divine in relation to man. And so this brings me to the First Amendment, right? Which is, okay, our freedom to speak is in the First Amendment. What else is in the First Amendment? Our freedom to not have a representative as between us and God, right? Like the fundamental battle of America was against Catholicism in like no small way, right? They were like, we don't want your representative, your corrupt priest, between us and whatever we got going on upstairs. And so, that's part of the Representation Foundation exploring kind of that tension. And, I'm hopeful that, in times of trouble, maybe, Roger, you're right, and things will have to get worse before they get better. I hope and I pray that we're going to have a viral moment, and we can make big waves before then. But we'll see. All right, sorry for the ramble, Jeff. Go on to your next question.
That's okay. All right, so last question for the night. All right. So, and this might maybe change Roger's mind on this just a little bit with this question, okay? Because I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give a little bit first. Is on the global stage, we see China, Russia, and North Korea all aligned, and we have India kind of waiting in the wings over there. Meanwhile, in the United States, we are embroiled in trade discussions with both adversaries and allies. We're not winning any friends right now, which poses a problem for us if everybody else is lining up on one side. How can we reformers unite our country and lead on the global stage again? And to direct at Roger with like, things have to get worse before they get better. Who's to say how worse or what is the worse, right? Maybe the worse is the fact that we see everybody in the global stage is aligned against us, and we decide to start fixing the problem before that rise of political violence escalates more and more. So that's just, if you're rational, and if you're looking at things and you see the numbers stacking against you, you might turn to your friend who you've been arguing with for the last, 5 years about Trump and Biden and go, maybe we should argue about something else. Maybe we should work together to fix the system. And again, back to what can we do as reformers to capture that energy? There's so much political energy out there, in my opinion, and it's all focused in the wrong area. How do we change their focus and energize them into our reforms? Sarah, I'll let you go first on this one.
So one of the kind of conversations that we have, every single day as electoral reformers is, how do we get representative people elected? How do we get these elected representatives to reflect who we are as voters and the diversity of the American population. And at some point along the line, somebody made a point about, the end game of representation isn't just representative elected officials, it's representative legislation. We actually want the people to feel like the things that we're getting done, that we're able to get anything done in the first place, that'd be nice, and B, that the things that we're doing are taking us in the right direction, ideally in the right direction for everyone. So again, that's where there are all sorts of things that we can do out there that are hyper-polarizing. Like half the people are like, we need to do this, and the other half are like, absolutely not, under no circumstances. But there are tons of things that need to get done, that can get done, that pretty much any reasonable person is going to be like, yes, that makes sense, especially if they're informed and they know the science and it's been vetted and they've read that. So things that depolarize and empower the public discourse, when we look at representative winners, it's not just that, like, I think my faction has more people and so we would win. It's that this better future that we're creating, it may not be either of these parties that that would be the winner. It might be something that's bigger than and better than both. It's more than the sum of its parts. And I think that's what we have the potential to be as a country. The USA was the first nation in the world to enact modern democracy as we know it. So it really was absolutely groundbreaking, cutting edge at the time, but it also was a little bit the first pancake. They were really smart with the Constitution. They made it so that we have the ability to make change where needed, and even without changing the Constitution, voting reform isn't encoded in the Constitution. Our current voting method, we have a ton of freedom to upgrade it. And pretty much the vast majority of modern democracies that have followed since the United States of America was founded, they don't vote the way that we do. So there's a ton of information out there on what works, what doesn't work. There's a ton of cutting edge information that's really relevant, where now we can, it used to be that if we wanted to build an architectural masterpiece like the Duomo in Florence or something, which is this incredible dome. They hired, a generation of engineers to stack stones in a circle, and then they got to about here, and then it collapsed. And then the next generation was like, I have a better idea, we'll try it this way, and it collapsed. And I think it was maybe the third try that they finally got the dome to close, and they were like, wow, we can do it. Voting reform is not like that. There is, we can model public opinion, we can model voters and candidates and systems and see, is this engineered well? Does it work the way that we think it's gonna? So there's a lot of peer review, and the peer review in science is really clear that star voting does a great job at electing representative winners, at incentivizing honest voters, at rewarding candidates for reaching out across the political spectrum. It's legal in all 50 states. It's just a 5-star rating. Everyone already knows how to do it. There are easy things that we can do first, and then from there we can tackle the more polarizing and harder questions.
All right. So I'm going to go to Roger. Roger, how can we unite the country? How can we unite the
Short
country?
form video, TikTok.
It's funny because sometimes the problem is the answer, and I think that TikTok is a big problem right now. But you may be right.
It's a flippant response, but it's not without thought behind it or belief, right? Short form video, the attention span of the average, not even just American, but the average modern human is so small. I mean, we're spending what, an hour and a half tonight we'll spend talking about this stuff. Most Americans, they're interested in the Wheel of Fortune or inside edition, what some of celebrity stuff. That's what they're interested in, and they will it will be hard to get the interest of Americans that's how they want to spend their time until it all comes crashing down. Previously I said much more blood will have to be spilled. I also believe much more wealth will have to be destroyed before people will say, hey, wait a second. We had all this money. We had a great thing going, and now it's turned out very badly. Again, a denozo. Americans are just not paying attention, and those that are paying attention have sorted themselves into the extremes. The middle's not paying attention. I don't know how to get that message out. That's the central dilemma we face.
Just super quickly, I will say, I have a housemate, a pretty new housemate, who's 20, college student, Gen Z, and they're sick of short form. They're sick of online little dopamine hits. It's boring. It's the same thing they were stuck in their room doing as teenagers, and they actually want to have the real conversations, have the long conversations, be out in person. So it may be
I'd
that
be
we're
interested to
coming out
know.
of that phase as a society where, like, we want no substance. I think people might actually want some substance.
Well, that's a single data point. So I would be interested to have a conversation with this housemate and say, do you find this to be something that you experience among your peers, right? Give them a job. Say, hey, man, you ask 10 people this question and come back and report the results. Because it would be an interesting thing to find out if there is a movement among the youth away from short form.
I think the rise of the podcast as a long form debate method,
Good
it
point.
kind of shows that there is that hunger out there, at least for a certain group. And I think
Yeah.
that reading is on the rise. Barnes and Noble has done really well over the last 5 years. A lot of that has to do with the structure of their business, but I think it has to do with me too. And I'm not I'm not serious here. I'm not the only person that's gone down this route. I have met so many people over the last 5 years that COVID, in a lot of ways, was an opportunity for self-improvement. They had a little bit of time. The world stopped for like 6 weeks, or 3 months or 6 months, depending on where you were. It was a longer period of time. And people had opportunity and time that they didn't have previously. I used that time for self-improvement. I had been, debating about going back to college. I wasn't really happy with my small business. I wanted to make changes, but I didn't know how. And I couldn't afford the college. COVID, obviously kept me at home. So I decided just to self-educate and start reading. And like I said, I feel like I meet somebody new every day that's like, yeah, I read a lot more than I used to read. And I think that continues on. And then, to the other point, there's a great Tim Carney. He writes for the Examiner and I think some other places. I apologize if I'm getting it wrong, but he's got a great article out there. I tweeted it on my personal X, jmayhew28. It's basically, are we raising a generation of leaders, or are we raising a generation of followers? And I think that there are a lot of parents out there. My Instagram footage is flooded with parental, advice and how to talk to your kids, how to educate your kids, how to make your kids responsive and lead groups. And that's something that I instill in my children every day. We don't do the short form dopamine hits. My 8-year-olds read biographies. I write them specifically for second graders. I write biographies of great Americans. Right now, we're working through all the presidents. Today, they did James Madison, actually, and then they take questions on it, and they love it. Like, it's entertaining to them, right? Because it's something that dad's energized about. It's something that people love to learn. I think that's the thing that's forgotten in the last 30 or 40 years with the rise of entertainment. I think we as a society have forgotten how fun learning is. And I think there's a generation of people out there who are remembering how enjoyable it is to learn. I've mentioned this before. You get the weekend dad who's now an expert barbecuer, right? Because they've taken this time to like learn how to smoke the meats and they're preparing the fire at 7 o'clock. My brother next door, he's got a farm. He's got chickens. They've got a garden. They self-sufficient. He's teaching his kids how to grow their food. They're eating the food that they grow on their land. Like, this is a movement already happening in America, and it has been happening. And I think that, it's just those people are going to get older and they're going to take those leadership roles in the next generation. And I think that there's a lot of hope out there is what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of hope. Even if we can't see it, it's underneath the surface. All right.
You sound like me. It's going to happen in the future. And, the next generation, it's going to be great.
We have to be that bridge. All right, Walter,
Yes,
your
that's
turn.
what I've been saying. We have to be ready.
Yeah. I return to you mentioned the U.S.'s position globally, and I actually think that the foreign policy argument, right, to the neocons, to the anti-neocons, to all of the billions of dollars of industry that depend on us being reasonable actors on the global stage, or trillions of dollars. I think attracting that money to the understanding that uncapping the House or voting reforms, like that reforming the structures create a stronger America for the next 5 generations, is probably the best way to get a bunch of money in our coffers to really accelerate this. If I'm being honest, I think that they realize that in over centralizing the powers in the executive branch, that America is swinging between, Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump, and the rest of the world is just like, oh my God, I'm dizzy, right? Like this doesn't make any sense. And then, the other thing is AI. I keep touching on AI, but I think it is the hot topic. And I think it helps people educate themselves, right? And potentially, find primary sources. I think it also is a huge threat. And so the option is, for us to take a top-down AI model approach, which is what China's doing, right? So China's going to be training their models, weights and measures, gets pushed out to everyone. Everyone's on the same page. That's the authoritative doctrine. And I think that by uncapping the House, we have the opportunity to endow each of our members of Congress with a model that is trained on the same set of data, through the Library of Congress, but that they can play with their weights and measures so that their constituents and other members can basically cross-check each other's models, right? So you have models checking models, and I think that is probably a better recipe for competition on the global stage. And it's unclear to me how you would get that without kind of forcing that in the representation setting. So that's my bet on how we make this happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, AI has a huge role to play in this next phase, and it's really interesting. Um, the funny thing is, as we were preparing for this event, y'all sent over the event flyer, and we're like, "How does this look?" And it had like, I think you had asked it to delete the background, but it had deleted like one earring, and it had like moved my eyes, and like it had like deleted my freckles. And so what we really need AI to be trained to do is be like, I gave it my best effort, but I messed up. We didn't create a graphic in which Sarah has 2 ears. Sorry. Or, if you ask it more important questions, AI will never be like, here's a bunch of facts, but I've scrambled them and they're not quite correct anymore, just so you know. That's what I want to hear from my chat GPT. So for years, we've been testing these models and saying, asking electoral reform questions, and they'll give you a very confident answer, which is just plagiarizing good sources and spitting out something that's like sometimes right, but often wrong, and they won't say. And it's like, if you were a 3rd grader and you did this for homework, you would get an F. Like, AI needs to learn to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then people need to stop thinking that AI is thinking. It's really just sourcing stuff and putting it together, and it doesn't have common sense. So it's an interesting tool. We need to use our own brains still. They're not obsolete. So I think in an era where we have so much information and a lot of bad information being thrown at us, it becomes more and more important to have these debates where you hear both sides. And both sides can say, here are a couple points, you can look them up. We can point people to good primary sources. We can combat each other's, narratives where they're wrong or where they're, biased or missing a key piece of the puzzle. So I do really think long form's going to be a big part of the future. I think debate and discourse, and especially discourse where maybe we're not on both sides of a mic and an audience, but where we're like sitting down at a table across from each other and we're both maybe drinking something together or even breaking bread. We need to humanize these conversations and make sure we have the, good information to start from.
The peace pipe. We need to smoke the peace pipe together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here you
So
go.
that I'll take a plug here. At No Cap Fund, we're organizing and planning a representation summit, and we're going to do all of those things. We're going to break bread together. We're going to debate together. We're going to have an open forum where people can disagree civilly. So we welcome you to it. When we get to the date and the location, we'll let you know, and we'll send you an invite to be part of it.
Spring in Virginia is.
Yes,
That's
tentatively spring in Virginia. That's what we're working on. We're hoping to have it some things finalized here in the next month or so. And to touch on, what Walter was saying about the AI model, the China model where it's top down, the United States model where we want it to be bottom up. That's how our governments work, by the way. We're supposed to be a bottom up government. They are a top down government. And ultimately, to plug my other podcast, What the Book again, if you've ever read, have you ever read Ender's Game? Anybody? So it's absolutely fantastic. We read the whole series through the podcast. If you go to season 1, we read Ender's Game, and the Earth is faced with an alien invasion with an alien species that is a centralized power, and we defeat it with a decentralized power, and through competition. Is exactly how it happens. It's exactly what Walter's talking about here. So if you want to know more or learn more about centralized versus decentralized authorities, but you want to read about it in an interesting way, go check out Ender's Game or the entire Ender's Game series. All right. So that's it for tonight. We're going to go around, just last words real quick. You want to leave the people with something. Sarah, make sure to share your socials with people as well. We'll go ahead and start with you.
So definitely, if you want to learn more, check out equal.vote. That's our website for the Equal Vote Coalition, and also starvoting.org. That's our website for star voting. And from there, you'll get our videos, our articles, our everything that you might want to find. On every platform, you can look up Star Voting or Equal Vote Coalition or both, and you'll find us there. So I especially recommend our YouTube and
Awesome.
our Twitter, or the artist formerly known as Twitter.
The artist formerly known as Twitter. I like it. Roger, last words for the people tonight.
The last time the House of Representatives was expanded, astronomers could not yet be certain that anything existed beyond the Milky Way. Not only has our world changed so much, but our understanding of our world's place in the bigger picture has changed radically since the House was last expanded.
I
Done.
love that. Walter, final words for the people.
Well, one thing that has not changed is our seeking for truth amongst a Machiavellian world. And our founders understood that came down to numbers. You need to be able to look people in the eyes. You need to be able to get a feel for whether or not they're lying to you or not. And it comes down to a numbers game. I believe firmly that in the end, truth and love wins. Along the way, it's a bumpy road. But our founders also, I think, firmly believed what I just stated, that at the end, love and truth, they win. So go get it.
All right. Well, thank you all. Thanks again, Sarah, for coming on the show tonight. We very much appreciate it. We're looking forward to learning more about star voting. And I'm definitely going to check out your YouTube channel. I wish I would have done that
Yeah.
before the show.
Oh.
I don't even know why. I'm such a old person. I don't ever go on YouTube except to upload our own podcast.
Well, Jeff, you've disclosed that you're a reader. You should read our articles, and maybe
have
even the reviewed ones. They're organized by like intro level, more in depth, deep dives.
I
So
did
we
read
have
some
a
of your
blog.
website this weekend.
Yeah, but she's saying
Reading.
articles. There's technical
Oh,
pieces.
technical. Oh, well, I
There's
got work to do. I've got work to do.
something for everyone. But yeah,
That's right.
thanks for the plug on the reading, and the sci-fi ending, I think is a really good plug for this moment. We are in the future, and I have an amazing vintage sci-fi collection behind me right now. So we're really, standing on the backs of giants.
Sci-fi is my favorite thing to read. Besides a political biography, it's sci-fi. I love sci-fi. Ender's Game, Philip K. Dick, Orson Scott
What about
Card.
Asimov?
Asimov, yes. Oh my gosh, you're gonna get me going. Have you been
Nice.
watching the Foundation series, by the way, which is absolutely fantastic on Apple? This is what I'm spending my final words on. There is a lot to be learned about political power, factions, and to Roger's point, Roger, if you're not watching Foundation, you would love Foundation, I promise you, because it flows with your perspective of what's happening and what's going to happen.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it. My TV budget is very small, but I'll take a look.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's books out there. There's a 10-part series, so you can read it too.
Yeah,
I think that they've done a
exactly.
great job on Apple. It is very entertaining. But for the listeners out there, I do very much appreciate you tuning in. Remember, we're going to upload this up to our YouTube channel. You can follow us at NoCapFund on X. You can go to our website, www.y435.org. You can find our representation reading list. You can find our representation station podcast. You can find our declaration, read and sign it. You can sign up to volunteer, and you can even make a donation. As Walter said, we're going to need money to get this thing off the ground. So if you want to support something positive, if you want a little hope in your life, try to help us out. We very much appreciate it. So again, peace, love, and representation. Thank you for tuning in to the Representation Station. Don't forget to visit our website at www.y435.org and sign the Declaration for Representation. And don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on X at NoCapFund, on Facebook, NoCapFund, on YouTube at Uncap the House, and on Instagram at NoCapFund. Thank you, and don't forget, peace, love, and representation.